And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Bud Elliott. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson. We are winding down our win totals. So if you have not gotten a chance to listen to any of our previous win totals episodes, we're talking the ACC, Pac-12, Big 10, Big 12, Notre Dame, BYU, and some choice group of 5 selections from the squad. All of it is available in the feed. It is a great way to get ready for the season. And now it is our final week. We will do the SEC East today. We will do the SEC West later. And then finally, just to get you a little bit ready for the rhythm of the season as it approaches on Thursday, it will be our first episode of Locks. It will be the win totals lock. So we've given you all these different picks, but sometimes we say, we're not my most confident pick, or I really like this pick. Well, we got to whittle it down. You've got to have your card ready. Win totals locks coming up at the end of the week. Very excited about all of that. We got 7 teams here to tackle. Gentlemen, are y'all ready to count them up?
Let's do it.
As much as I think it's the under is a safe play, like I can't even
count them up. Count them up. How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
I can't fathom 8 wins.
How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
I just can't. I don't see it. It's not on there. It's not the schedule I'm looking at. Unless there's another schedule somewhere.
Should have worn my Georgia t-shirt, a gift from Tom Fornelli when we were Georgia Bulldogs podcast. We haven't really declared one way or another how we feel about the dogs. This will certainly be instructive.
It's time to tip our hands.
Yeah, over under win total at Caesar Sportsbook at 10.5. The over -130, the under +110. The excitement about Georgia in part comes from the fact that we get such an awesome game at the start of the season. Neutral site game against Clemson in Charlotte. Clemson very comfortable in Charlotte, but Georgia not too far. I expect that to be, it is a sellout. I expect it to be somewhat of a 50-50 split, a great kind of atmosphere there. The rest of the non-con, you got UAB, Charleston Southern, and Georgia Tech for some good old-fashioned hate. The draw from the West, Arkansas at home, Auburn on the road. And I guess I want to start this. We've got some news from Georgia as Eric Gilbert has left the team for personal reasons. So if that has influenced your debate or influenced your decision at all, definitely let us know. Which way are we going to stand on the Bulldogs sitting at 10.5?
I'll start. I'm going under, but it's not a confident under. I don't really feel confident on either side of this total, honestly, because it's like that first game of the year, I kind of get the sense that if Georgia beats Clemson in the opener, it's probably going over. If they don't, it's probably going under, just because while the rest of the schedule really isn't super difficult, like they get Florida at the neutral field as they always do, but I don't know what Florida is going to look like exactly. We'll get more to that later in the show, obviously, but I just feel like looking at this schedule with road games at Auburn, with that Florida game on a neutral site, and with that Clemson game, there's a very realistic chance for 2 losses on the schedule. I think that this is a Georgia team that will be better than last year with J.T. Daniels playing at quarterback all season long, but we've seen injuries on offense to George Pickens. We've got the Eric Gilbert situation. We don't know what his status is going to be going into the year. So there are some question marks, although I do think they are talented on offense at the receiver position, at the running back position, and on the offensive line. And defensively, they're very good. So when I talk about concerns on this Georgia team, they're the kind of concerns that are like, they might only be 10-2 instead of 11-1. So my numbers push me slightly to the under here, but I don't really have an exceptionally strong feel on either side.
So it's the quarterback's job to pump up the rest of his unit, right? So when JT Daniels is walking around at SEC media days and at all preseason media availability, and he's just reading off the list of skill position players in the wide receiver and running back position like it's a grocery list, and talking about how much confidence he has in each one of these players to be able to go out and deliver, that they've got a full understanding of the scheme, that all the work they put in at the end of last year and throughout the offseason has made him really excited about what's going to happen. I don't think that's all like JT Daniels fabrication. And I think that I hear him express that kind of confidence, and I take some notes that we really might see that small sample size from the end of the year expanded in a big way. Gilbert's loss could be very significant because he's such a high ceiling talent, But I mentioned this in the group chat, even when he was going to be going to Florida, not Georgia, I still thought that this was going to be an 11-1 Georgia team. My big question that I have on my notepad is, where are the tough road games? Because Clemson's a neutral, Florida's a neutral, and where else are you going to be really concerned about Georgia going without it being just a massive disappointment? So minus 130, I got to lay a little bit, but I'm on the over here.
So my numbers say under very slightly here, but we got some good iTunes reviews that said, hey, like the win totals pods are supposed to be more about reviewing the conference. So I'm not going to talk about my lines quite as much. I think Chip brought a really good point up about where are the tough road games. I would ID Missouri and Kentucky as teams 3 and 4 in the SEC East for this season, and both of them have to come to Sanford Stadium, right? As far as the games that are quote unquote losable, like maybe at Tennessee, maybe at Georgia Tech, maybe at Auburn, but I really don't feel, and maybe Auburn fans will be mad that I put them in the same category there
as Georgia Tech,
and Tennessee.
Probably deservedly so.
Yeah, sure, I would agree, but like those games aren't like 100%, 95% lock type games to me. They're more high 80s, I would say. Maybe Auburn high 70s. There are some concerns I have about this team, though. I'm going to bet the over. Probably not hard. I already have Georgia for the Natty at 10-1, so I feel nice about that number locked in. But they already had their center go down. We'll see if Cedric Van Pan is going to handle him there. I'm a believer in the offensive improvement and a believer in J.T. Daniels, but I will note that 3 of the 4 teams he played last year when he started to light it up were either really bad defenses or defenses that were absolutely gutted in the case of a good Mississippi State defense that had a bunch of guys out. And so you have to have, I guess, some question there. Like, is he going to do it better against the better defenses? Against Cincinnati, he struggled a little bit. And then he also had some good throws in that game. Arik Gilbert is a question because they were playing him at receiver, and they already lost George Pickens. I do think they have dudes on this team. Marcus Roseme is a guy I've liked a lot out of high school. Apparently, he's come back very strong. Offensive tackle, maybe a little bit of a question. Is it Broderick Jones? If not, I guess we'll see. But then I think about some, and look, I think secondary is a bit of a question too. They lose Tyreek Stevenson to Miami, but they get the stud from West Virginia to transfer in. I just think Georgia has a pass rush this year, right? When I talk to the guys who coach at Florida State, and they tell me, hey, Jermaine Johnson's the best player on this team. Jermaine Johnson was a backup at Georgia and was not going to start. So I think they might really have some like dudes up front this year who can overwhelm most of the teams they play. So I don't think there's a ton of value in this. For the show, I will go ahead and go with the over.
So I think Georgia is going to be boom or bust. And that's where I like Bud's like 10-1, take them to win the Natty. I would lean more towards the bust just because I'm a little more skeptical of JT Daniels. Like you mentioned, he's the caliber of competition he's played against due to, the uncertainty. And Georgia fans can be a hard time because when they, June 1st hits and they get Darion Kendrick and they get Gilbert, it's like, oh, Kirby's amassed more talent again. And I was like, sometimes you got to be careful with that talent that comes in. There could be risk that comes with it. Some of that risk we're seeing unfold. So I was curious to see what changed June 1st as far as the odds makers. Win total didn't change, and the line against Clemson didn't change. It's been pretty steady there at 3.5 the entire time before they signed those two and after. Well, guess what? Last couple days, we find out more news about Gilbert. Does anything change? Nope. Still at 3.5. Win total still at 10.5. I want so bad to take the under. But man, and this goes to Bud's comment. I think their backups could roll up and get 11 wins probably. I mean, it's just the schedule is a joke, which is kind of funny because all we do is talk about the gauntlet of the SEC, and this is one of the easier schedules in the country. And Clemson is not easy. Georgia's not or Florida. The Florida Georgia game will not be easy. And I think that's the one. So if you go under, I think you have to make the assumption they're losing to Clemson. And you have to assume they're losing to Florida. If you don't, if they split, if they burn you on one of those games, where's the other loss going to come from? Like I don't
what
know.
it
And
is for me,
what?
honestly, it's I feel the same way like you guys are feeling about the amount of talent on this team and how much they're better than it. I have to factor in the Kirby Smart factor in that I just feel like they're going to screw up somewhere. Like I have to put that in play. It's like I feel like they could beat Clemson and still lose twice. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's just one of those things for me. It's like we were talking the other day when we were doing the Big Ten about the Pat Fitzgerald factor. This one goes the other way. It's like, there's room for a mistake or some late game questionable decisions here.
So you're saying like the South
too.
Carolina game. Like remember that Georgia South Carolina game that
2 years ago at home. It was in Athens and they lost. So like there could be a slip up in there. I'm going to go with Tom. I'm going to go with the boomer bust. I'm going to say I'm not buying into the hype. Like typically I will try to buy low and sell high, and I think the hype around Georgia, the expectation of this is their year, I just think it's a little bit too much. So I'm going to take the under.
By the way, I mean,
I think 10-2 though is probably a likely outcome.
Do you think? First of all, by the way, Danny was talking. I had him as over on the sheet, so I need to make sure I put that in there correctly. There's no way in hell I would ever bet this,
Right?
No,
because like to me, this is. Do you like this team? Yes or no. If you really like them, bet them against Clemson. If you don't, bet Clemson. I just don't think there's really much of a why am I going to wait 14 weeks to get my money back on something that has a pretty decent shot of being decided in week one, especially if you like the over. If you like the over, take dogs on the money line and get your cash like day after Labor Day.
And I think you've got like the best bet that's possible on Georgia this year. I think the best bet on Georgia is that 10-1 to win a national title. I got one at like 9-1 a couple months ago. So it's like, that's for me, my preseason future on Georgia. That's it. Cause I feel like that's great value. There's no value on this win total that I could really find.
Agreed.
Go Dogs.